Welcome back to the Afterword, a conversation about the future of words. We're so glad to have Bryan Miller and Brittany Koester here with us to continue our conversation about the stories that help us persevere, overcome, and be motivated. So let's talk about the weather and the climate. How do weather changes, storms, or droughts affect the price of coffee and the livelihoods of the people who grow coffee? Whoever feels inspired to just jump in there.
Yeah, I can definitely take this one. It's you'll have different seasons. So like when harvesting coffee, there's a harvest season, and then there's kind of like a growing season. So there's two specific times throughout the year that you'll have like a harvest season. And when those coffees are being harvested and stuff like that, prices tend to fluctuate, obviously, depending on the weather and stuff like that. So a lot of the times you'll see kind of not really technically African coffees because they're closer to the equator. So their seasons don't really change that much, or, the weather might affect it, but the seasons don't really change. But if, looking at Central American coffees or even like South American coffees, those tend to fluctuate in terms of prices and things like that, depending on how much they could actually harvest. Because it's, the volatility of the soil, all of this other kind of stuff that plays a part in the growing process of the coffee that, could really, you might not even be able to harvest any coffee. And then that's like, that's an entire year's worth of work that you can't make money off of. So it's really important that, when you're buying a coffee, where the money's going to go to in terms of like the livelihoods of the farmers and the growers and things like that.
Yeah. And also when you are buying a coffee, I know what I've run into is, if there's any sort of change in the weather that affects that coffee, like that coffee may not be available. So like the Peru that I was talking about earlier, if something happens, we might not be able to get any of that coffee. And so, that sucks for us who we want to drink that coffee, but you got to think about the farmer, the people that work on that farm and cultivate that product. Like that's no money for them. And, the weather definitely plays a big role in it.
It's fascinating too. I just wonder, I know in some countries there are the subsidies that support farmers, and we'll maybe talk about that, a little bit later on. But, we've talked about some of the benefits of coffee and coffee cultures, but let's take this to a different level. What are some more of the distasteful aspects of the coffee story? Brittany, you've alluded to it a little bit. And how can we be more aware, like some of the issues that you were talking about with exploited farmers or child labor?
Yeah, I think this is something that I've recently started, like I said, really doing some research into, because at Azalea Coffee Bar, we are focused on supporting females in the coffee industry. So we are sourcing all of our coffee from female producers, which is something I'm really passionate about. But I also feel like an obligation to educate my customers about some of the darker history of coffee. And so, like I mentioned earlier, slave labor. We cannot talk about coffee and not discuss sort of the origin and where it came from and colonization and all of those sort of things that aren't really fun topics to discuss, but I think it's something that we need to think about and sort of pay tribute to those that maybe didn't have the best experience when cultivating this product for us. And similarly, there's a movement now to sort of learn about where your coffee comes from and how the farmers are treated. But it's still not a great, what am I trying to say? You're probably going to have to cut this out. There are some farmers that are not treated well. They aren't paid well. I think Bryan was talking a little bit about it earlier. Sometimes there's so many people that have their hands in a coffee before it reaches your coffee shop. And the person who is doing this backbreaking work to cultivate this product maybe isn't reaping any of those benefits. when it comes to women in coffee, the reason that I'm so excited about Azalea and about us carrying female coffees or coffees from female producers is because a lot of times it's a male dominated industry, especially in a lot of these countries that grow coffee. Men are the ones who own the farms, even though women are a lot of the times the ones who are doing a lot of the hard labor, and they maybe aren't having access to capital or training to be able to grow their own coffee business. And so it's important for me to support those women and tell their stories to our customers.
That is fantastic and very eye-opening as well. As you said, many hands touching that coffee before it gets into your cup is fascinating and very eye-opening. Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Bryan?
Yeah, I agree completely with Brittany. I think that you can't really appreciate the coffee that you're drinking without knowing the aspects of where it originated or how it originated. And when you get these people who are super excited about third wave coffee, those single origins or those, the cafes that are brewing really fancy, expensive coffees, you get those people the connoisseurs, I guess, so to speak. And it would do a disservice to not really tell them, about like every aspect of the coffee, where it came from, how it was made, the farmers that did it. So a lot of the times on the bags, you'll see, when you buy specialty coffee, you'll see the elevation, or you'll see where it was grown, the farmers who specifically, harvested those coffees. And I think that's super important to educate people, to say like, hey, this is a real product that somebody grew for me to enjoy. And I think that's just really cool to appreciate. And then just understanding something in depth gives you more of appreciation for it in general. So when you learn about, as Brittany was saying, like, the darker parts of the coffee industry, you begin to appreciate it more. You begin to understand that this drink that I have every morning has a rich history, whether it be, dark or like a dark history, or, it's got history to it. Also, another cool thing, Brittany, have you ever heard of Katia Duke? She is
I haven't.
She is a female farmer from Honduras, actually.
Okay.
I got to meet her a couple years ago. She's really, really cool. She has a few varieties of coffees that are fantastic. And
I'm trying to think. So the reason I'm thinking I might have had her coffee. So recently, Inda Coffee Company local is our roaster, and Nick, the owner, had brought in a coffee. Does she have like a crazy amount of children or something? Is this her? Am I making this up? And she like took over the farm when her husband died? No. Okay.
No.
There's another farmer that is, has a cool story, but I need to check her out.
It's funny that you mentioned Nick and Inda and stuff like that, because the coffee roastery that I used to work for, the owner of the coffee roastery is also a coffee importer, and he gets a lot of coffee to Nick. And
I think this one in North Carolina, correct?
Yeah, that's was the De La Finca Coffee Importers. That was where I used to work with Nelson. And Nelson's really good friends with Katia as well. So I'm sure like just that connect right there, you can get some of her coffee. It's called San Isidro. It's fantastic.
Wow,
and her story,
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. And Katia's story is really crazy too. Like she built, off the profits from one of her roasts or one of her crop years, she built a school in one of the most dangerous parts of Honduras. So
that's wonderful.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I just had to look up the coffee that we have, but this is not that one. But it's from Honduras, and I believe it's from the same roaster, or the importer, sorry. So I'll have to check on it. That's awesome though. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, no, definitely.
This is the magic of podcasting, right?
Yes.
I know, right? We just stopped answering your questions and just started talking.
That's perfect. That's what I'm serious. That's the magic of podcasting. You bring people together for conversations. During the pandemic, how has the coffee culture helped sustain communities? Brittany, you want to take a swing at that?
Sure. I mean, I think, I didn't have a coffee shop during the pandemic, but I definitely had to switch my business up. And so I know a lot of coffee shops did as well. I mean, just from, mobile ordering, and we did deliveries with 72 companies. So I was running around everywhere downtown taking people coffee, which is actually really cool and fun. And I think people enjoyed it. But yeah, just having to get creative. And because, I mean, a coffee shop is a place, we've talked about how it's such a social place for us and brings community together. And so when you can't have everyone in that building because of the virus, then you have to think kind of outside of the box. And how can you get this product to people without them physically being inside your store?
Yeah. And just to piggyback off of that too, as like the coffee shop that I work in, we've had to drastically kind of change the way we approach, interacting with customers and stuff like that. It's kind of, it's always nice to see familiar faces and stuff like that. But, as of right now, Piecewise isn't doing any indoor seating. With the governor opening back up South Carolina and everything, like people are itching to get outside and everything like that. So it's kind of, for us, we kind of took a little bit of more of a precaution to say, hey, we're still going to be here. You can come inside the store, you can order. We have outside seating. But for now we're not doing our indoor seating. So, and at the height of COVID back in 2020, it was, we had to basically just change the way we did everything. And it was really the people in the community, in the KC community, that was like, we don't want to see Piecewise go. We want to support you guys. And, we had people that would come in and buy bags of coffee that were like, you know what, I'm probably never going to drink this, but like, I'm going to buy it to support. And it was just something that was it was really cool to see, the people that would come in and be like, hey, like they drop a 20 in our tip jar, and we'd all just be kind of standing there like, that's cool. Like, thanks. But it's just, and that's what a coffee shop's for, it's there for the community. So it was really cool to see it the other way, that the community was there for us,
That's a great story.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Well, just behind crude oil, coffee is the second highest traded commodity in the world. And I'd love for you all to talk to us about some of maybe the trends that you're seeing come down through this commodity, maybe how policies and political instability maybe impact this beverage. You all have talked about that a little bit. Brian, why don't you get started on that one?
Yeah, sure. A lot of different, I guess most likely, I know in like specific regions in Africa, and even kind of like Honduras as well, or not even, I think for Honduras, it's the second highest imported product behind, I think there's a specific fruit. I'm not sure which fruit it is, but in most of these places that produce coffee, it's their number one imported, or exported product. So they want to push that as fast as they want to push that. And in terms of, political instabilities and stuff like that, it really just affects the pricing of coffee. Like one year you might be able to source a coffee for a few dollars cheaper per pound. And you're like, oh, wow, this is a great coffee. I want to get more of this. And then the next year, something might happen, or it's also like local politics in the regions too. It's like all of the local politics that happen in those regions could drive price up, could drive price down. You might not even be able to get that crop again. It really just, it's crazy how much little kind of things can impact something like that.
Yeah, kind of that drop of the pebble and the rings that go out when you throw a pebble in a pond.
Yeah, exactly. The ripples, right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about you, Brittany?
Yeah, I think, I was just, when you were talking, I was thinking, it truly is crazy how many things can affect coffee. We've talked about the climate and things like that, political issues. There's just so many factors that can change the price or change the availability. And it's just this strength that we all, I don't want to say take for granted, but I feel like we kind of do, because for most of us, it's just a daily thing that we have. But just thinking about everything that goes into it and everything that can affect it is it's wild to think about.
Yeah. So, Brian, you mentioned this a little bit before as coffee being like that wine connoisseur or someone who wants to stick their toe in the water or their toe in the coffee a little bit deeper. But we've seen some trends happening with coffee. What are some things you all are seeing? It used to be, go to the store, buy your freeze-dried coffee, or even now, then they became instant coffee. That was a trend. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing that are driving some of the direction of coffee?
Well, from what I've been able to tell and from what I've been able to see in the past, years, you've had waves of coffee. Like first wave coffee drinkers, I would say it's probably just like, your Folgers at home. Like you got, it tastes like mud, but I don't care. I'm just going to drink it and help me get energy. It doesn't matter what it tastes like as long as it's black and hot. That's it. And then, back when Starbucks opened up, you had this new wave of coffee drinkers to say, it was like, okay, I want my coffee to be as convenient as possible, get it as fast as possible. And I want it to taste like a cupcake that was liquefied, and that's kind of like the behind the scenes of like a second wave coffee. And now we're moving into this third wave of coffee. Like we've been in this third wave, I don't know, for the past couple of years of where these specialty coffee shops are popping up. And you've got these people that really care about their craft that are saying, I'm going to take time and meticulously roast this coffee. And I'm going to be able, like, I can serve it to you in a method that is going to take maybe 10 minutes. From the setup to the pour to the brew process, all that together is going to take 10 minutes, and you're going to get a 12-ounce cup of coffee, but it's going to be the best coffee you've ever had in your entire life. And I think that's kind of where we're at in terms of, and then I don't really know what the next wave of coffee is going to be like, but I'm perfectly content in the third wave of like, I'm going to enjoy the process of this coffee, no matter how long it takes. And I think that's why coffee shops are so important, is because you get to be a part of that process. Like as the consumer, you walk in and you buy a pour over and you get to see your barista, carefully pouring this coffee just for you. And it's just, it helps you become part of that process. And I think that's really cool.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you giving us some clarity on what first wave, third wave coffee looks like. That helps me understand the history a little bit more. What about you, Brittany? Anything else to add?
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. I think that people are really valuing the craft of coffee at this point, like Brian said, and they're also valuing the story behind the coffee. I think that a lot of people want to know where their coffee is coming from, which I think is super cool. But what I've found recently is like there's an older generation that just loves the straight brewed coffee. And then there's the people in between that kind of drink espresso, but will also do a brewed coffee. I feel like I'm kind of in that age range. And then there's this whole younger group of, I'm going to say kids, but they're not all kids, but like they've grown up on Starbucks. They've grown up on this whole sweetened coffee thing. And so they're not going to brew coffee at their house. Like they are going to go to a coffee shop and they're going to buy a latte that has some sort of syrup in it or some blended drink. And that's what they enjoy. Which, I think it's fine. I've always sort of said like the best coffee is the kind that you like, like just drink whatever you like, but it's just interesting to notice the difference in age and kind of how people drink coffee.
Fascinating. I love how you said that we want to know the story behind it. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have both Brian and Brittany here at the Afterword, because there's a story behind coffee, and I appreciate you all sharing that insight.
We have one signature question for our podcast. We ask people to give us a metaphor. It doesn't have to be a perfect metaphor, but just a word picture that helps us understand what coffee really does in our culture and in our world. So whoever wants to just jump in there.
Oh, man.
I know. I have thought about this all day, and I cannot come up with a metaphor. I don't What do you have, Brian?
Oh man, all right. My brain is now firing on all cylinders. Okay. I would probably say that, like, if I had to pick something for a metaphor, it's kind of like coffee's, I mean, it's kind of like taking a Forrest Gump, like drinking a coffee is like, it's like a box of chocolates, you could, take from different parts of it. You'll have people who love this one specific one and they'll only go for that one, or, the other, chocolate fans or even Girl Scout cookies. That's a good one too. Like, people who love Samoas are going to live and die by Samoas, or tagalongs or whatever, how you want to say it. But, I mean, as long as people are, enjoying the coffee, or like they're taking what they like and they're enjoying it, I think that's, it's always great. As long as they're drinking the coffee, you know what I mean? I'm not drinking it, so I'm not going to judge you on whatever you drink. So, it doesn't mean I won't get you to, try my, $12 pour over, but.
True. And as you said that, I just started thinking, and I don't even really know if this is a metaphor, but I'm trying to think of a way to put into words, the fact that, and we've talked about this, how many people actually touch coffee before it gets to you. So maybe just thinking about, like, I was thinking about this today in COVID times. I picked up something at Target, like an actual item, touched it, and then put it back. And I was like, how many people have done that? So thinking of coffee that way is like, we sit here and we look at this one little cup, but think of all the people that have been involved from the very beginning, when it's just a little plant, to get it to your cup. That's what I think.
I love that. These are great metaphors. You guys were
They're terrific. Thank you so much for sharing. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since Amy and I first discussed telling the story of coffee on the podcast. So, Brittany, where can folks learn more about your work, connect with you? Where's your coffee shop going to be located? All that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. So Azalea Coffee Bar is opening hopefully in March. It's at 2700 Divine Street, right downtown Columbia, and perfect location for us. But people can follow along on social media, Facebook and Instagram. It's Azalea Coffee Bar, and we'll hopefully be announcing our open date soon.
Awesome. Brian, how can listeners connect with you and learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so definitely same thing, like social medias and stuff like that. Piecewise Coffee on Instagram and stuff like that. And you're always welcome to swing by the shop and say what's up and hang out. I can make you a pour over if you'd like. But yeah, just Piecewise Coffee on the Instagram.
Right. Well, thanks so much. And for everybody else, join us next week for a discussion about stories and words centered around vaccines and the trends we're seeing regarding COVID.
And while you're waiting for that next episode, we would ask you to please leave us a review, rate us on Apple Podcasts, become a subscriber to theafterwordpodcast.com, because it does help keep the conversations going. You can also find us at Google Podcasts. And as always, remember, you are welcome at our table.